Welcome to video 2 on personal relationships. This video will focus on friendships. First, let's define friendships. It's important to understand that friendships are voluntary relationships. Now, it could be that you're friends with somebody who has another relationship with you as well. So, for example, you could have a relationship with a boss, a cousin, a brother, but the friendship part of it is voluntary. You make the decision to be friends with someone. It's usually between people who are equal, though we'll talk about what happens when that's not true. And friends are people who mutually influence one another. There's usually a sense of balance that each person is having some influence over the other person. Reciprocal friendships are solid interpersonal relationships between people who are equals with a shared sense of loyalty and commitment. That means that when we look at it in terms of social exchange theory, each friend is getting an equal amount of benefit and doing an equal amount of work in order to maintain the friendship. And so it is truly reciprocal. You do something, you give something, you say something, the other person responds in kind. And it's that balance that keeps the friendship going. Associative friendships are a little bit different. Associative friendships are usually very pleasurable. We enjoy other people's companies, and they're between acquaintances or associates that, although they're positive, they just don't have that commitment of reciprocal friendship. So you don't feel that need to share at the same level and to respond to each other in the exact same way. So these are going to be lighter social relationships and not particularly personal relationships. Receptive friendships include a status differential. So this means that the relationship is asymmetrical. There's more power on one side than there is on the other. So for example, let's say you get along really well with your boss. You can get along really well with a boss or even with a faculty member, and you can connect with each other. You can have lunch, you can share a lot of personal information, but there's still going to be a power imbalance. The relationship is asymmetrical. That's a receptive friendship. And that can have interesting consequences because that power differential can change the way that people open up and communicate. Then, of course, we have friends with benefits. And that's essentially a close friendship that includes sexual activity without the romantic expectations or the romantic commitment. And this has become a more modern idea about friendship. And people have started to include it in the study of friendship because it is so much more common than it used to be. So, what are we looking for when we're picking friends? Well, let's go back to the beginning of the semester and acknowledge that similarity is a very big part of what we want in friends. We want people who are like us. So, if we are very active people, we want people who are very active. If you're a runner, you might seek out other people who run or cycle or do other things to stay fit. If you're somebody very into clothes and fashion, you're going to want somebody who can also talk about clothes and fashion with you. So we're looking for that similarity. Physically attractive is also important. So just as it is with romantic relationships, we do tend to lean toward people who we think are more physically attractive than we are. We always seek out people who are attracted to us in some ways. And so even if they're not physically attractive, they are somebody who is attractive because they're socially competent. So this could be somebody who we see as able to interact with multiple people, able to do it with a lot of strength. And then, of course, we want somebody who's responsive. We want somebody who is going to respond to our text messages, our invitations, and give us that reciprocity when we are spending time on them. We expect that they will respond by spending time on us. Now, here's the important piece. Friendships have to be maintained. Now, you might be thinking, yes, but I have relationships with people that I have known for years, and I might not see them for 2 years, and when we get back together, it's just like it was yesterday. And those friendships do exist, but for the most part, friendships have to be maintained. And even with those particular people, what you're really doing in that environment is bringing together your shared memories more than sharing intimate daily details. So, when we talk about maintenance of relationships, what we're talking about is making sure that we're constantly keeping in contact with people to the same level that they're keeping in contact with us. If we stop contacting people as often as they contact us, then we start getting into that relationship disillusion. So, the number one impediment to friendship is actually availability. And we know that as people get older, this happens more and more often. In fact, we should probably look at how friendships change over our lifespan from adolescence to our later in lifetime. Let's start with adolescence. So, this is 13 to 18 years, a time frame most of you have just recently left. Friends are incredibly important starting at age 13. Research shows that age 12 and younger, for most children, parents are the most important source of information and they are who children look up to. Once they hit 13 to 18 years, that changes significantly and children spend more time paying attention to their friends. And that's why peer networks and peer pressure become such an important part of life. Friends replace parents as providers of social support. Children no longer come to their parents and talk about their problems, they go to their friends to talk about their problems. So, friends will help them negotiate this new emotional world that they live in. So, you're talking about a world that has new romantic entanglements, that has drugs and alcohol, and trying to make decisions about work and college. And all of this ends up being something that they discuss with their friends more than their parents. It's not unusual for adolescents to experience some jealousy and possessiveness in their friendships. And they will look for acceptance and validation of their self in their friends. So, this is a very emotional time. It's a time when they're leaning very heavily on their friends, and friend drama can go through the roof. Young adults, which is where most of you are, 18 to 29 years, have a different set of friendship needs and requirements than they did as adolescents. So they're exploring and experimenting with various life and relationship choices. This is where we learn about ourselves. Everything from our clothes to our hobbies to our interests to picking careers. All of this happens at this time when we're exploring and experimenting. The friendships also become more intimate. Part of this is because we have a lot more time to spend on our friends and with our friends. So, for example, if you're in college, you probably have more opportunities to see your friends either in the library, in class, in between, etc. Friends provide feedback on self concept, careers, romantic relationships, sexual relationships, civic life, social life, political, extracurricular. There really aren't any areas where we don't invite our friends in to test our ideas and experiment a little bit. Now let's move on to adults, 30 to 60 years. So this is where I am. And one of the real struggles once you get into adulthood, particularly to start your own family, is that you have less opportunity for friendships. Remember that we talked about availability as being a really big influencing factor in terms of whether or not friendships will succeed. This is the time of life when people have the least amount of availability. We know that early adulthood is spent doing a lot of working. And then as you add relationships and family commitments, your availability for actual friendships goes way down. So people settle into their careers and they nourish long term relationships and they have children. So it's a very family focused time. There are many more time constraints and interpersonal tasks and obligations to be met. There's an increased desire for stability and continuity. So, this is not a time of life when people are looking to experiment and try out new things so much as get into a rhythm and have some stability. There's also a desire for similarity in terms of career, position, race, age, partner status, class, education level. So, for example, we're more likely to become friends with people who are of the same class that we are. We are more interested in becoming friends with people who are married if we are married. We want to hang out with people who have a similar educational attainment. And so we're going to try and match ourselves with people who are like us. One of the biggest challenges, of course, is making sure that we're matching with people who have spouses that our spouses like. And we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to romantic relationship because the social network that you're in can be either a benefit or a challenge to your romantic relationship. Older adults really they focus on the remnants of previous friends and friendship patterns. They don't make as many brand new friends after 60. If they had a gregarious social life, they will continue to associate with their friends to the extent that they are physically and mentally able. Those who relied primarily on a partner or their family or just a few close friends will have more limited interactions, but that doesn't mean they'll be less happy. They may be equally happy with those small limited interactions. Friendships that have extended over adulthood or earlier, those older friends that we talked about at the beginning, those people you only see every few years but you connect with, they're going to still be important because they're going to be able to reach into each other's shared past. You'll see this with siblings as well, because siblings are the only people who remember your youth the same way that you do. So that's a little bit of a look at friendships. Join us for the third video where we're going to spend some time getting to know romantic relationships.